If you go into the woods with HG, hello, I'm HG Tudor. Some years ago, when I was a teenage boy, I naturally was still living with my parents, my father and matriarch. We lived in a substantial home on the edge of a wood. The nearby wood was a place that I would regularly go to. It was a place where I, with my siblings, would go and play games. The long summer holidays often being filled with our adventures, creating tree houses, building dens, having a rope swing over the stream that gurgled through one section of the wood. It was a place where we spent a lot of time and where I would also go with my friends. There were times that I would go there alone also, to see what I could find, to see what might be lurking within the wood, to see what might be there that I could play with. The wood, of course, changed its nature, dependent upon the season. From the rising sap of spring through to the verdant greenery of summer, and then the autumnal magnificence of the burnished leaves. The mist rising with shafts of sunlight percolating through it, the golds, the ochres, the red, the russet, the orange, a fiery carpet that I would kick my way through, looking for something to play with, looking for someone to entertain me. And then, when winter came, winter, with its coldness and all that it would evoke by way of memory. The snow-carpeted ground, the boughs of the trees weighed down by the weight of the newly fallen snow, that muffling silence that has encompassed the land. Whatever the season, it brought with it opportunities, and it was one year, as summer gave way to the edge of autumn. It was the last hurrah of summer. It was a warm evening. I recall that I was in the extensive garden at my parents' house, which afforded a view of the lane beyond, which led into the woods. One evening I was there. I was probably practicing my football skills, dribbling back and forth, shooting at the goal that had been constructed, doing keepy-uppies, that type of thing. It preoccupied me. The rest of the family were in the house. It was early evening, dinner had been consumed, and we were about our various own interests and chores. It was then, as I went to collect the ball, that I heard the sound of two voices. They were young. Interested as to who it might be, for it was often quiet around where we lived, I clambered up onto the fence that surrounded our property. Athletic and agile, it was easy enough for me to do, so that I was able to pop my head above and look for the source of the noise. It was then, just further along the lane, that I saw two figures, a girl and a younger boy. Were they friends? Were they boyfriend and girlfriend? No. Something told me that these were siblings. The girl turned. She had a mix of sort of blondie brown hair, and she turned, and her brown eyes alighted on the boy. I could see that there was a kindness in her oval-shaped face, and I sensed that this was somebody that I wanted to know. The boy cried out something, and she laughed, turning to run away from him. Clearly they were playing some form of game of chase, as she, taller and older than him, was able to keep a distance from him, as he complaining set off after her. I decided that I wanted to learn more. I hopped over the fence, casting a glance towards the house, and saw that nobody had seen me exit. Good. The last thing I needed was matriarch appearing and scuppering my plans as she upbraided me for being about something else. I landed, as I had done so many times, on the slight embankment that was beneath the fence and allowed myself to jump down into the road, the lane beyond. I waited, watching the two figures, allowing them to get further ahead as I set off after them, jogging at a slight pace. I watched as the boy, his protestations still drifting towards me over the warm evening air, the sun still reasonably high in the sky, and the warmth of summer such that I was just dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. The two of them were similarly dressed. I continued to watch as he chased what was clearly his sister along the lane, and then turned, and they entered the woods. At this I quickened my pace. I didn't want to lose sight of them. So I broke into a sprint, heading up the lane, leaving the house behind, and then finding the spot where they most likely would have entered the woods. It wasn't difficult to find them. They were crashing through the undergrowth, branches moving, as I then decided that I would set off after them. I watched as the chase continued, and then the girl stopped. Had she seen me? I ducked behind a tree and waited, peering out from around it, and noticed that the two of them were in conversation, but I recognized that they weren't looking about themselves as if they were suspicious that they were being followed into the woods, but rather they were perhaps discussing the commencement of a new game or what they might do next. There was a natural path that they had followed that led on a walk through the woods, and I knew that where it led to, for these woods were my playground, and they had entered my playground. That meant that I wanted to play with them. I wanted to cause them to belong to me. I was less interested in the boy. He seemed too young, and I sensed that he might be an irritant. But it was the girl that attracted me. I wanted to get to know her. I wanted to find out who she was. I wanted to find out where she came from. I knew many of the people around our locality as a consequence of the school that I attended, and of course, one knowing the neighbours, and I had not seen either of these two ever before. Regularly, I would be outside, attending to various outside pursuits, and that meant that I would often hear and see the comings and goings in the lane outside and recognise who that it would be. A neighbour walking the dog, local school friends heading off for a spot of fishing. Whatever it might be, I tended to recognise who it was. I did not know these two, and I wanted to know her. I decided that rather than run after them, which would cause them perhaps to be concerned that they were being pursued in some way, that I would get ahead of them, for I knew where the path would be leading to, and I would intercept them, and that would give me an opportunity to find out who it was that was in my wood. I therefore darted off to the side, and made my way in a manner whereby I would be running in a sweeping semicircle that would bring me out ahead of them, just by an old tree that had been knocked down in a storm and lay there, dead, by the side of the path. I ran. I could feel my interest rising. Where had they come from? What were they going to do? What was I going to do, particularly with her? These thoughts urged me on as I raced through the bushes, hurtling across a small boulder that was covered in moss, until eventually I burst onto the path, smashing through the bushes, dusting a few leaves off myself as I stood there. I was breathing fairly hard, but as an experienced runner even at that age, it was not arduous, and I was a fast runner. This meant that in actual fact I could not see them. I was not concerned by this. I knew that they would come this way. They didn't strike me as the type of individuals that would deviate from the path. I sensed that they craved security. I saw this in the way that the girl kept turning and looking for the brother to see where he had got to, that she wouldn't run so far away from him as to leave him out of sight, but rather wanted to keep an eye on him. I could see that she cared. I noticed also that when they were conversing in the wood, the way that she placed her hands upon him was tender, not in an intimate way, but in a kind way, a way that demonstrated that she regularly cared for this person. It made me wonder what their life was like, and as I stood waiting, I wondered what I might do with them. It did not take long before I could hear the sound of chatter, and then, as they rounded the bend in the pathway, the girl and the boy came into view. This was my first opportunity to get a better look at the two of them. The boy I would place somewhere around the age of 10, maybe 9. He had short brown hair, his clothing was ordinary enough, and he had a pleasant enough countenance, brown eyes. His sister, and you could tell that they were siblings, for they did look alike. She was around 14 years of age, the same age as me. She was pleasant. There was an openness about her face that I recall. She was not pretty. She was more beautiful, as she stood on the cusp of womanhood. But there was something about her that told me that she would be very much open to engagement. The two of them walked along the pathway. They hadn't noticed me, as she was looking at him and he was looking at her. And then he turned and stopped, which prompted her to stop also. I knew that the appropriate thing to do here was to smile, to disarm their alarm. I duly did so. He looked uncertain, but she returned the smile, although with a degree of nervousness. "Hello," I said to them. "What are you up to?" The boy looked to his sister again as if for guidance. She then spoke. "Just plain." I noticed that she did not have the local accent, that she came from somewhere to the north. That would explain why I had not seen her before. I walked forward to the two of them. They didn't retreat. They didn't bristle. I could see that they were interested to talk to me also. I walked forward to them until I was stood in front of them, taller than them both, although she was reasonably tall. "Hello," I said again. "I'm H.G. I live around here." She nodded and said, "I'm Claire, and this is my brother David." "Hello, Claire." "Hello, David," I said, giving them another smile. Names placed to faces. Faces that had entered my woods. The introductions had been effected. Now it was playtime.